Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're going over the 2025 elections, where things currently stand now, just a week until election day. So I'm recording this video on Tuesday night, so a week from election day, and this is where everything's currently shaping up in some of the most important elections happening in 2025. First things first, I'm going to go into the New Jersey governor's race for 2025, as of the governor ones, this is expected to be the most competitive. If you've seen my prior videos, you'll already know this, but if you are not, this is the first time watching one of my videos. The two candidates that are running are Democrat Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill and Republican Jack Ciattarelli. Now, as for where this race is currently standing right now, the polling shows a very competitive race here, though it is seeming that Mikey Sherrill is starting to get a little bit more of a lead heading into the final few days here, where most of the polling averages now have Sherrill leading by around 5 points in the margins. Just to give you an idea of the rating scale here that I use, is 1 or under is tilt, 1 to 5 is lean, and 5 to 15 is likely, and 15 over is safe. So based on the ratings right now, it seems Mikey Sherrill is just barely getting into the likely Democratic category of over 5 points, but under 15, based on the polling averages. And when you look at how this race has trended, I'm going to be using Decision Desk HQ just as the chart here in 1 second. You'll see that the last few weeks, there have been a lot of close polls, but pretty much every single one of them have shown Mikey Sherrill leading over Jack Ciattarelli. And it's been very consistent in this race, especially when you compare it to how the race was going back in 2021, where the Democrat Phil Murphy was leading the Republican Jack Ciattarelli in the final few days of the campaign. You see the last poll by Research Company or Research Co. Murphy had 50, Ciattarelli had 44. The Trafalgar Republican pollster around this same time frame, 29th of 31, had it a 4% race, but most of the polls showed Murphy reaching that 50% number. The biggest problem for Mikey Sherrill this time around versus Jack Ciattarelli was that in most of the polls, she wasn't really hitting 50% yet. And now the last few weeks or so, she seems to have consolidated a lot of support, and now she's getting 50% in a handful of polls, including in Rutgers-Eagleton at the beginning of the month of October. It also seems that the undecided numbers have gone down from the last few weeks as well, where it was around 8 to 9% or so. In the last few polls, we have 5%, 5% undecided, 2% for A2 Insights as well. So the race in the final few days is certainly narrowing up and continuing to be very close, but it seems Mikey Sherrill is starting to consolidate a lot of support in this race. As for Jack Ciattarelli, relative to how he's doing in 2021, he is polling technically better than he did in 2021 when you look at the actual margin, but he's got 42.7% in 2021. Now he's up to about 44.3 on the average of things. In Real Clear Politics alone, he had 42.7. This time around in their own survey, he has 45.3. So Ciattarelli's polling about 3 points better than he did back in 2021. And Mikey Sherrill is polling about 1 point or so under what Phil Murphy was doing. But the reality of this race still is that even though Jack Ciattarelli is polling better and probably running a better campaign, it does show that Mikey Sherrill, the Democrat, is still leading into this race, heading into the final few days, and it just becomes a question of math. Assuming the polls are correct, which, based on how they've gone recently, I don't see any reason to believe why they wouldn't be. Just doing simple math here, if the average of averages is 49.4 for Sherrill, 44.3 for Ciattarelli, and 6.3% saying other or undecided, Ciattarelli is going to have to win basically every single undecided vote out there to defeat Mikey Sherrill in this race. Can it be done? It certainly can be, and could the polls potentially be wrong, which allows Jack Ciattarelli to win? I think that also is a small possibility, but given where the race has been the last few weeks, where Mikey Sherrill's leading in pretty much every single poll by a decent margin of more than 4 to 5 points now, depending on which poll you're looking at. The last two Republican polls that have come out have shown it a 3-point race and a 1 point race, but given the partisan lean of those polls, we'll probably expect the results to be a little bit less Republican than that, because they're weighting the poll to show Ciattarelli doing better. More likely than not, we're going to see this race be very close, but Mikey Sherrill has a lead right now going into Election Day, where she's going to be narrowly favored to win. And as I mentioned, it really just, when it comes down to it, becomes a math problem. We've seen the trend in this race from about the beginning of September, where Sherrill and Ciattarelli, Sherrill's been leading this whole time in this race, but there were a lot of voters that were undecided on whether they're going to support Sherrill or Ciattarelli. Now, since really the end of September or so, towards the middle to end part of September, we started to see a lot of these votes consolidate. Cheryl on September 21st was 47.6, Chitterelli 39.4. Now, coming into October, by the end of the first week, Cheryl went up to 48.8, Chitterelli 43.5. So this race has seen more of that Jack Chitterelli's been consolidating a lot of GOP support in the state, more so than Mickey Sherrill, as she already had a pretty decent floor of Democratic support in this race. And then the last few weeks, though, it's actually Mickey Sherrill's support who has gone up more than Jack Chitterelli's. On October 10th, Jack Chitterelli had 43.6% in the Decision Desk HQ polling average. Sherrill had 48.1. Whereas now, based on the polling, she's at 49.9. Chitterelli's at 44.5. So when you look at it, Chitterelli hasn't really gone up too much in the last few weeks, where Mickey Sherrill's seen the one whose numbers have gone up by about 1.8%, where Chitterelli's gone up by about 1. So ultimately, what does this mean? Well, going off the polling right now, it looks like Mickey Sherrill, bottom line, is leading in this race. It's not impossible for Jack Chitterelli to win, especially if there's a big election day voter turnout that the polls are missing for Jack Chitterelli, that the polls end up being wrong, Chitterelli could win. But based on how everything's looking right now, the expectation is Mickey Sherrill will probably win this governor's race, but will win it by a pretty small margin of around 5 points, maybe 6 points or under. My prediction for the last few weeks has been Mickey Sherrill wins by under 5 points, though not by a very large margin, like around 4.5% to 5% in that range. And I think I'm sticking with that right now, as the polls in the final few days certainly seem to suggest that. The last closing point in the New Jersey governor's race I want to make is the question, the talking point that I've been using for a while now, which is Mickey Sherrill's getting around 49%, Jack Chitterelli's getting around 44, 45%. What do the undecided voters do? There's still roughly about 5, 6, 7% or so of voters, depending on the average, that are undecided in this race. Ultimately, what they do and who they decide to vote for is what's going to decide this race. Mickey Sherrill certainly has the advantage right now because she needs to win less of the undecided voters to break 50%. She doesn't have to break 50% to win, but likely if she wins, she'll be doing so. She'll be breaking 50%. What do those other or undecided voters decide to do? And also important to note as well is what are the third-party candidates, the Libertarian and the Socialist Workers candidates, how much vote do they get? Because if they're getting a substantial amount of votes taken away from Sherrill or Jack Chitterelli, well, it's possible they could be drawing enough away from both candidates or from one of the candidates that it opens up the door for someone to win with less than 50% of the vote. For instance, if Mickey Sherrill's only getting around 49 or 48.5%, and the Socialist Workers Party candidates are taking around 2 or 3% away, it's possible Jack Chitterelli may have a little bit of an opening to win the race if he can get up to like 49% or 49.5% or something like that. But that would be a very big if, especially considering how well Mickey Sherrill's polling at this current point in time. So bottom line, we still have a very tight race heading into the final few days, but it certainly seems like Mickey Sherrill has the advantage and is probably going to become the next governor of the state of New Jersey. But this is definitely going to be a very close one, and as we saw in 2021, you have to count all the votes and see how it goes, because sometimes the polling isn't always 100% reflective of how it ends up. But right now, it looks like Mickey Sherrill is nearly favored to win this race, but early voting and election day voting is going to be a very big factor in which of these two candidates ultimately ends up winning. Now we'll move on to Virginia. That's where New Jersey is. Virginia is a little bit more set in stone a little bit. We've known for the last few weeks that Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, has held a pretty decently sized lead in this race, and really it has been pretty much consistent in the last 2 weeks or so. That has not really changed. The polling averages in this one have Spanberger leading over Sears on average by 8.3%. That is a likely Democratic win. And I think this race has been very consistent. The fact that we've known for a while Abigail Spanberger is likely going to become the next governor of Virginia. The question is going to be, what will her actual margin be on election day? Now with around 5% of voters undecided, Spanberger getting around 51, 52% of the vote, Sears at 43.2. It's really up to the undecided voters how this margin actually shakes out. Could those 5% that are undecided break more for Spanberger than Sears? If that would be the case, then we get into that above 10-point margin of victory in this race. Could they break for Sears? And if they do, or for Spanberger, they can go above 10 points. If they break for Sears, it could go down maybe into like a 6 or 7% range of election results. So that all remains to be seen how that's going to go. But in terms of who's leading this race, it's very clear Abigail Spanberger has been leading. The last time you saw a poll where Abigail Spanberger was not leading went some Sears, you have to scroll all the way back to the coefficient Republican poll from back in January of 2025, which showed a tied race. There has not been one poll that has shown Winsome Sears leading over Abigail Spanberger in this election. So clearly, Abigail Spanberger has had a command from this race really from the beginning. And as things have gone on, it's really only gotten to a larger and larger margin in this race. Spanberger is tracking to win, and she's likely going to win by a pretty strong margin. Also, it's worth noting there's only two candidates in this race, Spanberger and Winsome Earl Sears, so those third-party concerns won't be a thing as much like they will be potentially in New Jersey in this race. Just to show you the Decision Desk HQ polling average for this one and show you the chart here, this is how this one's gone. Where again, I showed you in New Jersey how around September we start to see support consolidate. A little bit similar, though a little bit earlier in Virginia, around the end of August, Spanberger was leading over Sears by about 8 points. But in this one, Spanberger has been the one to really accelerate the support, where she was breaking around 50% right around Labor Day in September, and she has really not gone too far off of that number. Whereas Winsome Sears seems to have peaked around 44.1% towards the end of September, beginning of October, and she also, thus far in the polling average, has not really been able to break that number either. While Spanberger in the final few days seems to be jumping up, now up to 51.4%. Now, obviously, we're still about a week out from Election Day, so if any polls come out in Virginia or New Jersey, it could certainly alter the polling averages. It may alter how we think these races are going to go. But it's looking like right now, especially in Virginia, the governor's race is going to be a likely Democratic win for Spanberger over Winsome Earl Sears. So just to give you a quick prediction here, let me find the map here. That's Virginia. Here it is, the governor map. For the governor's elections right now, things are really pretty consistent to how I had them last week. Virginia, I think, is still a likely Democratic win in between 5 and 15 points for Spanberger over Winsome Sears. Whereas New Jersey, though the numbers have gotten a little bit better for Mikey Sherrill over Jack Ciattarelli, I still think it goes in lean Democratic, which is right around a 5-point Democratic win. I have it around 4.7, 4.8% to be exact right now. So just a little bit shy of that 5-point threshold, but I think both of them certainly are trending to be on the Democratic side right now. Just quickly for some of the other races to watch for in 2025, we have the New York City mayoral race, where the polling continues to show that Democrat Zohran Mamdani is leading over Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa by, at this point, an insurmountable amount. There's not enough undecided vote left out there for Cuomo to catch Zohran Mamdani. Even if he won all the undecideds, he would still be losing by around 5 or 6%. And Curtis Sliwa is running in a very distant third. He is not going to have a chance at winning this race as well. Zohran Mamdani is winning by a very large margin. The question is going to be on Election Day, what does he ultimately end up winning by? I think we probably see around that 12 to 13 point margin victory ultimately come to fruition. Zohran Mamdani wins, whether it's a safe margin or a likely margin, we'll have to wait and see. But I think we're going to see Mamdani win this race by a safe Democratic margin without too much of a competitive election underway there. Also, it's worth noting, if Sliwa and Andrew Cuomo, if one of them were to drop out of the race in the next few days, maybe that would change things, though both have been adamant they're not going anywhere, and that's going to lead to a Zohran Mamdani safe Democratic win. So that's the New York City mayoral race. Not much has really changed in this one, really, going back the last few months or so. In the other two governor's elections in Virginia, the other two elections in Virginia, we have the lieutenant governor election, where the Democrat Ghazala Hashmi is leading the Republican John Reed by about 4 points here in the Decision Desk HQ. The issue with this race compared to the governor's race is there's more undecided voters left out there. There's also been less polling that have been done in this race. I think it wouldn't really be too much of a shock to see this race be a little bit more competitive than the governor election. We saw this in 2017, where the Democrat Ralph Northam beat Ed Gillespie by about 9 points. And then the lieutenant governor's election, I think, ended up being like a 7-point or a 6-point Democratic win. So I think we may see this race be a little bit more competitive than the governor one, but I think we're going to see the Democrat ultimately end up winning it, probably no matter what, as the Democrats are doing very well in Virginia. The last competitive election left out there in Virginia that could potentially go for the Republicans is the Attorney General's race, where the Republican Jason Miyares is now leading over the Democrat Jay Jones after the scandals broke regarding Jay Jones by about 2.4% in the average of averages on Wikipedia. Now, this race is interesting because what I've been saying the last week or so in this race is that Jason Miyares is leading, but look at the numbers. He's leading 47% to 44.5%, with still around 8.5% undecided. They're like with New Jersey a few weeks ago, when I said, yes, one candidate is leading, but there's enough undecided vote to flip that margin. This one definitely has that potential as well. Mayara's having 47% is the best a Republican is doing in Virginia in this election without a doubt, with the questions going to be on election day, what do those undecided voters end up doing? A2 Insights poll from just a few days ago showed Mayara's leading 49-48, a 1-point lead with 3% undecided. Now, if Mayara's wins, I think we're going to see something like this, where it's about a 1-point lead. But I will say, even with everything that's happened in this race, I would not entirely rule out the possibility of Jay Jones maybe potentially winning this race. And that's due to the fact of how many undecided voters are left out there. You also do have to consider, yes, the scandals have significantly hurt Jay Jones, but he's also running on the ticket with a Democratic governor election and lieutenant governor election that are expected to be big Democratic wins that could ultimately drag enough voters down ballot for him, maybe of voters who are not familiar with the scandal or not paying attention as much to the scandal, that may vote for the Democrat anyway, and that may give him just enough votes to be very competitive and maybe potentially pull off the upset. So I think right now Jason Mayara narrowly wins against Jay Jones, but I'm not exactly 100% confident in that going into Election Day that Jay Jones can't win due to the fact Democrats at the top of the ticket are likely going to be doing a lot stronger. And Mayara is only getting around 47% of the vote even after the scandals broke. Should be a little bit of a sign of concern for the Republican in this race due to the fact that Democrats are going to do so well otherwise in Virginia on election night. So Mayara is leading, but definitely keep an eye on the Attorney General's race because I think this may end up ultimately being the closest election that's up in 2025. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts. Stay tuned over the next few days as the election now just being a week away. I plan to do a bunch of videos over the next few days, keeping you as updated as possible on the final polling numbers, predictions, and such for these very close, important races. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.